Since 2008, she has been the head of the scientific research area at the Cadereyta Regional Botanical Garden here in the state of Querétaro. And her position encompasses planning, conducting, and overseeing scientific research, focusing in the support of curatorial tasks, fieldwork, interinstitutional alliances, fund seeking, and science divulgation. She has co-authored more than 20 peer-reviewed articles, devoted science papers, and 10 book chapters, primarily focusing in the flora and in the semi-arid region of Querétaro. Her experience includes participating in conservation projects for threatened plant species in Mexico and the United States. She has received the Elizabeth E. Bascom Fellowship in Conservation Biology from the Missouri Botanical Garden in 2016, and the Kittelman Award for Aspiring Public Garden Leaders from the American Public Garden Association in 2022. Please welcome her with a big round of applause to Professor Beatriz Maruri.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Where should I be? Is it better if I am here? Mejor si me callo. What are this?
It's one more try.
Okay.
Maybe not.
Okay. So I'm going without the microphone. Can everybody listen to me? Thank you very much. They have told me that I have a petite voice, a lower voice, so I will do my best effort to speak loud. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the introduction. And next one, please. Yes, thank you. Quizás mejor si tú me las pasas. Okay. Bueno, pero el puntero. Okay. So this talk is divided into 4 parts. The first part is to offer to you an overview regarding the objectives, endeavors, and tasks of botanic gardens in Mexico, and I'm going to exemplify this with the Cadereyta Regional Botanic Garden, which is my institution, of course. And then in the second and third sections of this talk, we're going to speak, and I will offer to you some insights regarding the reasons why a multifaceted and integrative educative approach is a good option to understand the complexity of life. Scientific and technical advances every year, more and more, are telling us that life is organized in systems, in complex systems, and that we should take advantage of a multifaceted approach using several disciplines to understand the phenomenon and processes of life. So at the Cadereyta Regional Botanic Garden, we are eager to create and adapt an STIM narrative in our living collection in order to incorporate this educative approach to our environmental education program. So this is these are the parts of the talk. Let's go ahead. There it is. Let's start with an essential concept. It might seem a very essential concept, but it's good to mention at least what is a garden. And the concept of garden is linked, interestingly, okay. Bueno, hello? ¿Sí? Well, I'll keep it, I will keep it. The concept of garden is linked to the etymology of the word. If we go to the ancient, to the Vulgar Latin, we see the phrase hortus, thank you very much. We see the phrase hortus gardinus, which means enclosed garden. And this definition immediately takes us to the idea that a garden is a space that is created and transformed by man. So it's a space full with natural elements, but it's being transformed according to the idea of a person to create an isolated space or an enclosed space. If we see the evolution of the word, we go then to the ancient German Garten, or the contemporary German Garten, and then go to the English garden. And then we go through the Italian giardino, and then the Spanish jardín, or the French jardin, which is the same spell, but with a different pronunciation. So A garden is a space transformed by man, and we have the idea of a garden as a place to have spare time, to have leisure time, maybe spending time with our families. You can see in the slide some examples of historical and contemporary gardens, very important around the world, like the Schönbrunn Palace Gardens in Vienna or the gardens by the bay in Singapore, but also some examples of gardens in Mexico, like the Jardín de Santa Lucía, which is a very important cultural hub in Mérida, and our very known Plaza de Armas in our capital city in Querétaro, which is a garden as well, a transformed space using vegetation. And this one is where politics happen every day. So botanic gardens as well are spaces transformed by men, but nowadays, botanic gardens are, at least in most parts of the world, aiming to support plant conservation. There is a worldwide organization called Botanic Gardens Conservation International, whose definition you can see right now in this slide, and it states that botanic gardens are institutions holding documented collections of living plants for the purpose of scientific research, conservation, display, and education. So I ask you to keep in your mind three main concepts or three main ideas of this definition, which is scientific research, conservation, and education. So from now on, at least for this section, I will be speaking about the objectives and duties of the Cadereyta Regional Botanic Garden as an example of what botanic gardens are doing. And I will focus in conservation tasks and educational tasks as well, because we are speaking about STEM educational approach. So, as part of the state of Querétaro, I mean, we are a public institution that belongs to the state of Querétaro. The Ministry of Education has a state science, a science and technology council, and our garden belongs to the State Science and Technology Council. Being a public garden, our goal is to strengthen or support the state development through the knowledge of its plant resources. So our main focus is on the plant resources of Querétaro State. How? Through the generation of conservation, use, and restoration strategies. And this is concreted and worked through the three aspects that I asked you to keep in your mind of the Botanic Gardens Conservation International definition of a botanic garden. You can see here that the garden then has three main objectives. The first one being ex situ conservation. Ex situ conservation concreted by the recollection, documentation, and curatorial maintenance of a living plant collection, which is the backbone of every botanic garden. This is not an exception. The living collection is the backbone of the botanic gardens. Environmental education, and in the case of the Cadereyta Regional Botanic Garden, offer to every single visitor and every single user that comes to the garden in order to offer to them knowledge, to raise awareness regarding the importance of biodiversity in our lives, and the importance of our actions to favor the conservation of biodiversity, and the importance to take good decisions in favor of the conservation of biodiversity, of course. And last but not least, scientific research, which is the case of our institution, takes place through projects, scientific research projects. We are constantly looking for funding to carry scientific research at the garden in order to gain knowledge and expertise to know the plant resources of the state, in order to generate knowledge as well to solve problems related to its conservation. Scientific research also takes place through the collaboration with other institutions, public institutions, universities, and institutes. I must do a very quick specification here, because I told you previously that our main focus is in the Querétaro state flora, but there is specific, even more specific focus in a region, which is the semi-arid zone of Querétaro and Hidalgo. That's our main region of interest. And just a quick word regarding this this part of the state. On the left side of your slide, you see the main deserts of North America. The biggest one is the Chihuahuan Desert. This is where the Cactaceae family diversified. And its southern end is precisely the semi-arid zone of Querétaro and Hidalgo, here. It's a very important place in terms of diversity of the Cactaceae family, because there's an interesting richness, and not only Cactaceae, but other arid plant family, and also a very important number of endemisms, I mean plants that only grow in 1 or 2 spots and in nowhere else. So this is the main area, region of interest of the Botanic Garden. So I will offer to you an ultra quick word on the conservation activities through the quick explanation on of the living collection of plants and its policy, because a collection of plants is not just a random group of plants. It needs to have a purpose, and I told you that we have a specific purpose defined by the mission of the garden. Our living plant collection has nowadays circa 340 taxa of 30 botanical families. And the policy of the living collection of the Botanical Garden states that recollection of plants is geographically focused, and it is not only geographically focused, there is also a group of criteria that determine which species is priority to introduce. It's a priority to introduce to the living collection in the garden. So specimens, we already told that about the regions of interest of our garden. Then the plants should be legally recollected, of course, according to the procedures in force at the time, the official procedures in force defined by the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources, the Semarnat. Of course, that proper field work should be done in the moment of recollection, and a phytosanitary principle operating in the recollection and in the moment of the accession of plants to the garden. Plants should be carefully documented, because the entire living collection is backed up in a database. Speaking of a living collection that has scientific interest, the collection and the database are 2 parts of the same thing. It cannot be isolated. It cannot be named a scientific collection without a database. And in the case of the Cadereyta Regional Botanic Garden, we have also as well backed up our specimens in national and regional herbaria, and this allows the garden to contribute to the knowledge of flora of the state of Querétaro. Now, speaking about the educational activities at the garden offers a non-formal educational scheme. Non-formal means that you do not obtain a degree. If you have education at the garden, you don't earn a degree or a qualification, but this doesn't mean that it's an informal scheme of education. In fact, it's very well structured, the educational process at the garden, and it has a guidance document that has been the funding of educational activities for many years. And since the beginning, even before we knew the specific approaches of STEM or other integrative approaches that I will speak about it later, the process at the garden has intention to be a multiple learning. So every person being educated at the garden should be able to understand, at least in a broader approach, that natural processes are linked and intertwined with every process occurring in nature, also in our human transformed environments, and so important for our lives. There are several means of to offer this educational program in the garden, as guided tours, talks, workshops, specific periodic activities as a monthly club for school children, the summer camp, which is a very classic activity and important at the Botanical Garden, and even experiences or activities outside the garden as a yearly science and technology exposition in which we take part at the Manuel Gómez Morín Center in Querétaro, organized by our State Council of Science and Technology. The yearly cactus exposition at Tequisquiapan in the summer, of course, the social media that we use to share educational publications, and radio clips. Radio clips are not currently taking place, but in the recent years, we have been also taking part in radio in a local news program to offer also the educational content of the garden. And I told you previously, there are no exceptions in the garden, which means that every person that crosses the gate, you're going to listen the message of the garden, and then you're free to go and enjoy the garden. But first, you're going to listen in a guided tour the importance of those plants, the importance of the objectives and work of the garden, and the importance, of course, of our own decisions and knowledge in order to sustain or to reinforce biodiversity conservation. I told you previously, I'm afraid it's not very clear, but the intention of the educational program of the Botanic Garden is that users should be to understand, at least in a broad sense, that everything starts with life, that life has its own processes. These are the general scheme of the concepts that people should be able to understand, at least in a general way, through the several processes of life, of biological processes that sustain life, and biological processes that sustain as well every human activity and endeavor. So the Botanical Garden program has had the intention to be integrative from the start. As a place like ours, we are able to offer sensory and innovative experience in which participants are in direct contact with nature, and that way the garden is a coherent place to develop a STEM narrative to be incorporated in our education program. So in general, botanic gardens are good sceneries for STEM because of this same thing of the non-formal education. They have the flexibility to put in place workshops and other activities that maybe should be a little more difficult to adapt in a formal educational scheme. So that is one of the advantages of the garden. A very quick word, especially if we have biology students in the audience. At least the Cadereyta Regional Botanic Garden, and we are hoping and promoting constantly the Mexican Community of Botanic Gardens, plan, put in operation and measure or advance our progress to help to achieve the objectives of the Mexican Strategy for Plant Conservation. If you're familiar with this document, congratulations, that's very good. If you do not know it, please take a caption of the QR code so you can consult it and download it and read it. And just a quick word also on the binding instruments. Our country is a part of the Convention on Biological Diversity. I don't know if you're familiar with this sort of international agreements in order to promote the conservation of biological diversity all around the world. The current biodiversity frame is the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Frame, which has targets for 2030 and goals for 2050. And I invite you to also consult the webpage, the website of this international agreement. International agreements makes a lot of sense because we are living in a single planet, and so we should be at least cooperating in order to use sustainably our biological diversity. Okay, now let's go to the next section of this talk. Why should we be adapting integrative educational approaches or multifaceted educational approaches in a space like the Botanic Garden that offers environmental education regarding the importance of biodiversity? Because life is complex. I know that you know that already. So I was telling you in the introduction that recent advances of science and technology are making us more and more clear the idea that life is a complex system, starting with the cell and its organelles and metabolic paths is a complex group of smaller systems that are interacting between themselves. And if you speak about the cell and then about the tissue and then about the organ and then the organism and then the population and then the community and finally an ecosystem, you see that at every level, the arrangement of life is in complex systems. So to understand the complexity of life, it's very useful to have an integrated, multifaceted approach. Let's have a quick look on the idea of the complex systems in biology. Complex systems in biology is a group of interconnected elements. You can see here a picture of a group of hyphae. Hyphae are the cells, the elementary unit of the fungi. And if we think of this picture in particular of fungi that is growing in the ground in contact with roots of plants and that kind of environment, they are not isolated. They are interconnected among them and among the cells of the roots of the plants that are living in that same environment. And they are interchanging nutrients, water, information, and even genes. So far, we know that already. So living systems are also able to have emergent behavior. If we speak about of the hyphae of the previous slide, the isolated hyphae cannot do the whole process it does in the ground in connection with the roots of plants. If we speak about another type of organisms like the monarch butterfly, you see a single monarch butterfly, which surely wouldn't be able to do alone the migratory route from Canada to Mexico, but it can do it in the group, in the migratory group of monarch butterflies, the Matusalem generation that comes to central Mexico to stay during the winter. And in fact, that it also adapt and vary their route every year is not exactly the same route or path, very different, slightly different path every year, not always easy to predict. So the system has an emergent behavior that the isolated individual could not perform. So living organisms, living systems are able to adapt to a variable environment. And you are watching now a very beautiful species of cactaceae. This is the Strombocactus deciformis, a microendemic species of the semi-arid zone of Querétaro and Hidalgo, which grows in a specific niche. But the thing here is that the landscape over geological and biological time was shaped by extremes of weather, alternating ice ages with periods of warmth, which were shaping the landscape in order to create these very specific niches where these places can occur, and of course, live and interact with other members of their community in their roots and above, and interact with organisms like insects and plants and mammals and birds. The systems, the living systems, are able to reproduce, to adapt, and to evolve. And one of the very classic the very classic examples to illustrate this idea is the pollination. The pollination that is a complex system involving a plant species and one or several insect species or bird species or other animals that help the plant to complete its life cycle. You're watching here a picture of a cacti flower, in fact, with at least 6 individuals and at least 3 taxa that are there helping the plant to complete its life cycle and also obtaining lots of very valuable resources in order to keep them alive. So an ecosystem is a complex system starting from under the ground and above the ground. A single plant like this Nolinaceae here, or this community or this population of Nolinaceae, can have an interaction with the organisms in the soil and have interactions with organisms above the ground, animals, plants, its own community members. And that's the way in which living systems work. And just a quick example of the scientific research that occurs at the Cadereyta Botanical Garden. This is a diagram made by a postdoctorate student who is studying the way in which pollinators and visitors go to the cactaceous species in the natural area of the botanical garden. And even when we are able to see that there are some of them who seems to be slightly specific, visiting only some species of the same genera, which is Opuntia, there's another group of organisms who have more complex relations, and this is only one season of observations and data analysis. So it is when an ecosystem is healthy, is complete, and has all its elements that is able also to support life. Maybe you know the expression or the concept of ecosystemic services. It used to be called environmental services, but now the concept is ecosystemic services, which are processes that the ecosystem can offer when it has all its elements complete, including microorganisms in the soil and the very big trees and big mammals, and everyone has a role to play. So the ecosystem can offer this type of regulation and support services, which mean that the ecosystem is able to buffer extremes of weather, or is able to offer clean water and clean air, and to sustain soil in its place. It's able to offer habitat for nesting, for breeding, for raising offspring, for the migratory species to go down and have a rest and have a meal. They have production as well. Plants are the primary producers, and their biomass is eaten by all of us. So these are the importance of the entire functionality of a complex living system, which is an ecosystem. And last, the information services, ecosystemic services. I like this one because the idea of the authors, when they explain it, is that nature is our ancestral reference. So when you go for a walk in the woods or in the desert or in your garden, it's like you are returning to the mother's womb. At least that's the way in which the authors say it, and makes sense to me. That's the way in which nature offers to us calm, spiritual and mentally speaking. So life is organized in complex systems at every level. And the way to understand this sort of complexity is being promoted through these educational approaches. We are today joined by your 7th STEM week, STEM week, or STEAM, according to the approach, if it involves art or doesn't. But I want to speak to you about another integrative educational approach that raised about at the same time that STEM in the United States, and it's called the New Biology. The New Biology is an educational approach to educate the future scientists. And STEM, as you know, STEM is to educate all kinds of scholars. So it was in 2009 when the National Research Council released a New Biology for the 21st century. It was a report. For the general overview was something that I already said, that biological research is amidst a revolutionary change. I mean, with the evolution of molecular techniques, bioinformatics, proteomics, genomics, and all the omics that allow us to understand at a very detailed level what happens in the processes that sustain life. So the New Biology promotes, you can see on the right side of the slide, the scientific integration of physics, chemistry, computer science, biology, engineering, science education, and mathematics in order to have a deeper understanding of biological systems. And also to advance in order not just to know, to understand and analyze, but also to be able to predict and to modeling. Why is this relevant? Because 4 main areas related to human survival are linked to biological phenomena. These are environment, health, energy, and food, that new biologists should be able to offer biology-based solutions to societal problems. So these are the four problem-solving areas. And the four-component cycle is sort of an elementary idea stating that you start integrating your different disciplines, and you have a deeper understanding of your problems, and you offer biological solutions, and of course, you have feedback to new problems or to improve your own solutions. And an interesting thing is that this report mentioned STEM as an essential tool for the preparation of future scientists. So sort of the same time, more or less, the beginnings of this century, the National Science Foundation published as well the report Science, Math, Engineering, and Technology, SMET, which was the acronym at that moment. Then it turned to STEM, which is easier to pronounce. And the overview is also rooted in the idea that we need to offer solutions, in this case, to the lack of human development and to prepare competitive labor force. There's a saying as well that it has roots as well in the concern of the development of Chinese science. I will leave that there. And the essence is that science and technology are interpreted through engineering and art over mathematical foundation. Mathematical as the universal language of every discipline, you name it, physics, chemistry, biology, of course, and even art. The universal language, in fact, are math. Okay, and now the next part of my talk is to speak about an example. I told you previously that at the non-formal but very well-structured educational program of the garden, we are aiming to develop a STEM narrative using precisely the plants of the living collection of the garden as models, so people can understand a number of concepts with the help of the plants of the living collection. I apologize for the switch in the color and fonts of the presentation, but this is part of a poster that we presented 2 years ago with the American Public Gardens Association, and I like the poster, and I just have some samples of it to present this to you. Besides all the reasons that I told you previously, there is another to improve education in science. Perhaps some of you might know this program, the Program for International Student Assessment, the PISA. Anyone knows it? Okay, doesn't matter, no, don't worry. Every 3 years, this evaluation is an international evaluation, takes place to evaluate teenagers, 15-year-old students, regarding their performances in 3 main disciplines: reading, mathematics, and science performance. There is a scale, you can see it in the left side of the slide, there is a scale, and there is also a qualification. The highest possible is 707, a little weird, this for me. And if you see the bar chart here, this is the performance of our country, of Mexico, in these years, 2003, 6, 9, 12, 15, and 18, in mathematics. So we are in an average. And if we consult the report and check the scale, the PISA scale with these 7 levels, and see where is our country, it says that Mexico score, grouping the 3 disciplines, reading, mathematical, and science, is between 2 and 3. That should be a concern, because if you are in level number 2, it means that you can understand, I mean, our country as a whole, with the average of pupils evaluated, items of relatively low difficulty. We are transiting from understanding items of relatively low difficulty to be in the low part of the items of moderate difficulty. The understanding of items of relatively high difficulty is showed by countries like Singapore, Switzerland, Scandinavian nations, and so on. But well, according to PISA, despite occasional improvements, our performance levels in reading mathematics and science are low when compared to the global results. And it also says, the report, that Mexican pupils used to be anxious regarding mathematics. I can relate to that. So those are the reasons why we want to apply the STEM narrative at the Botanic Garden. I told you previously about the importance to have a multifaceted approach to understand the complexity of life, but also the need to raise the level of Mexican scholars regarding science. So mathematics is fundamental for the understanding of life sciences. And the advantage of the garden is that you can learn mathematical concepts in a different environment other than the very formal environment of a classroom. So if you are in the garden, you feel you feel more relaxed, and that probably helps you to understand better mathematical concepts. So there is also an urgent call for a shift in the approach of scientific disciplines. And well, I told you previously that this STIM is the entry point to the disciplines that is promoting the new biology. So I am going to give you a quick example of the sort of models that we are working with in the Botanic Garden, but I need a volunteer. Can anyone help me to sustain the business? What's your name? Thank you, Berenice. Come here to this. Come with me. So I'm going to introduce you to a very beautiful plant whose name is Croinlenia grusoni. Croinlenia grusoni, well, used to be Echinocactus grusoni, but now taxonomy, and thank you because of those very fine molecular techniques lead to the adjustments in taxonomy. And now we have Croinlenia grusoni, known as well as golden barrel. Golden because of the beautiful yellow spines, that's obvious. It's a beautiful plant. And it's also a micro-endemic plant that only lives in a very specific environment, which, by the way, was almost vanished with the construction of a dam, of the Simapan Dam, in the boundaries of Querétaro and Hidalgo. That was the habitat, the original habitat of Croinlenia grusoni. And well, 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, a second population was described in Zacatecas. But anyway, the most traditional known population was that and was vanished with the establishing of the Simapan Dam. Thanks to that, our species is under threat, ranked as in danger of extinction in our domestic list, which is the standard 059, and as endangered in the global list, the red list of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. But I want you to notice one thing regarding our guest of honor, which is this beautiful, beautiful plant grown at the Botanical Garden. It has one feature that have many species of the Cactaceae family. Many species of the Cactaceae family can be easily related to geometric shapes. I want you to think of this Croinlenia grusoni as if it was a sphere. I know it's not strictly a sphere, okay, but just I'm talking about a model. Think of the Croinlenia grusoni as a sphere. You can think also of other Cactaceae species that resemble columns or resemble cylinders or resemble groups of the small pyramids grouped together. But please think of it as a sphere. And come with me so they can see the screen. Yes. But please be with me. So the elementary shape of the sphere is the circle, okay? And in a geometric shape, as a circle or as a square or as a triangle or something, you can measure and you can say, okay, this is the length, this is the width, or in this case, this is the diameter and this is the radius because we have a sphere, okay? So I want you to notice, perhaps some of you who are very far will not see it very clear, but this beautiful individual of Croinlenia grusoni that resembles a sphere is made of ribs, okay? It's made of ribs. It is not a smooth surface. It has ribs. And those ribs allow us to think that is a sphere that can have two diameters. An external diameter on the convex part of the rib, the external part of the rib, and an internal diameter, which is the concave part of the rib, where the rib is folded. And if we do our calculation, we can estimate just a quick clarifying point. This is the size not of this plant, but of a grown adult living in the garden. A grown adult of Crenellania grusoni has an external diameter of 38 centimeters and an inner diameter of 22 centimeters. Then you do your calculation and you find that the perimeter, the external perimeter, is bigger than the internal perimeter according to this calculation, speaking of this plant as if it was a sphere. If you do your calculations again, but now to estimate which is the volume that a sphere of this size is, you find that an adult individual of Crenellania grusoni is about 28 liters. That would be the volume in the external, taking the external part of this as the measure of the sphere. In the inner part of the sphere, the volume should be about 17 liters. And an average, if that should be suitable, would be about 22 liters. Why am I speaking of liters? Because Cactaceae are on the top of evolution of plants that need to live in a challenging environment where water is available only during a short period of the year. So here comes another interesting thing. We told about the ribs that are building this sphere, and these ribs allow the sphere to expand, to increase its volume, expand its size, and increase its volume, and then reduce again its size, increase the volume to storage water, and then reduce its size when the water is being used over the dry period of the year. So the ribs are about 3.5 centimeters width. Not this one, this is a young individual, but in the big one, the ribs are this width. And if you multiply the 39 ribs of the species per their width, you find that the perimeter, if the plant could expand at its maximum extent, would be a perimeter of more than two meters. If it would expand at an adult at its maximum extent, sorry, that doesn't happen, I know, but we're speaking of a hypothetical model. That means that its capacity to storage water would increase enormously as well. Why? Because the radius, the only dimension that you know of a circle, expands in all directions. That's the advantage of a sphere when you speak of it as a storage model. So it is a true golden barrel. These are the possibilities of a cacti. I know it's not going to grow that way, but it can expand with the help of its ribs and keep its structure and not deform, but keep the structure. Thank you very much, Berenice. Yes, thank you very much. So we can say, with no doubt, that Crenellania grusoni, as many other Cactaceae species, are expandable water tanks. And why is this relevant? This is relevant because the photosynthesis equation, to those who are biologists should know this very well, involves carbon dioxide, which the plant intakes from the atmosphere, and molecules of water, which the plant, like this beautiful individual of Crenellania grusoni, intakes from the roots and storages in its beautiful stem. And when they combine with a photon that comes from the sunlight and activate the photosynthetic systems, then you have the production, you have the chemical bondage of the water broken, the hydrogen and the oxygen, and the hydrogen used to combine and produce glucose molecule, which is the first part of the biomass production in nature. This is the primary production. and the oxygen of the water being released to the atmosphere, so you and me can breathe and be alive. So that's the importance of this type of plants, to storage water, to keep them alive, because water is available only during a period in the summer, at least in the habitat of these plants. And they are living water tanks, so they keep themselves alive and even are able to share molecules of water to their neighbors in the dry season. So this is the beautiful way, at least for me, the beautiful way in which nature has solved a very challenging environment with this model, a geometric model of a plant with a sort of a spherical stem that can expand and can contract without deforming. If we're speaking in the spans and shrinks, is what if we're speaking about STEAM, art, is the same principle that musicians use with the accordion. It expands and it contracts and it gets full of air, and then the air blows and produces the melody. But it also is used as a part of this two-wagon truck in Germany. So in the middle portion of the bus, it is flexible and can turn in the corners without trouble. If it was a rigid bus of this dimension, wouldn't be able to turn in the corners. And it's the same principle. These are ribs that are expanding and are shrinking as well. And in fact, this same principle has been used for many, many years. This is an ancient forge. Do you know what a forge is? Forge, the Spanish word is fragua, is the ancient workshops to produce cast iron and that sort of metals. So they need a very active fire. And as you know, oxygen is needed to have the fire active. That is the reason why when you are at the carnita asada, you need to do this to the fire in order to keep it active. Well, in a forge, they have these blowers. This is a blower that is, again, a bag with ribs that expands and gets full of air, and then you contract it and blow the air into the fire, and that way you are able to forge metals, for example, cast iron. So this is the sort of models that we are aiming to develop at the garden, so we can install a STEM narrative in the living collection, joining mathematical principles to understand biological principles and to understand biological processes that allow a plant to live in a challenging environment where the water availability is limited over the year. So one final figure, another figure, and I'm just taking advantage that I am here with you to have a little conversation about this. Maybe you know, especially those who are studying biology, that Mexico is a megadiverse country. They say that all Mexican biologists say this phrase at least once a day. That's true. I think so. Well, at least I surely do. We have about 23,000 and 25,000 of plant species, Mexican native plant species, 23 or 25,000. And we have preserved in Mexican botanic gardens 6,400 of plant species. This is the last update. It is from 2018. I don't think that things have changed meaningfully recently. And of this number, 500 are under threat. That means that these are the numbers that are still missing from botanic gardens. So there's plenty of work in conservation of Mexican plants that must be done. So this is an invitation to you that want to make conservation work for Mexican plants. There's plenty of opportunity. And well, just a final quick recap. I spoke to you regarding the activities, endeavors, and objectives of botanic gardens, and I gave you the example of the Cadereyta Regional Botanic Garden. And then I told you about the complexity of life as the reason to put into practice integrative educational approaches. And I finally offer to you one example of the narrative that is being built at the garden. We are hoping to finally one day have our STEM narrative installed in the garden so people can go and learn about mathematics, biology, and its complexity and beauty in our living collections. Okay, here are some suggestions of selected readings. And I want just to mention, now that I am finally finishing, that the Cadereyta Regional Botanic Garden has several accreditations, international accreditations. We are a BGCI Botanic Garden. We are members of the International Arboretum Community of ARBNet. We are members of the Mexican Association of Botanic Gardens, of the American Public Gardens Association, and recently we've been awarded as members of the Climate Toolkit of the same APGA. We are a public garden that belongs to the Ministry of Education and its Science and Technology Council of the state of Querétaro. And we have been very happy to be here with you in this 7th CM week. And I say we because I am joined with the companion of my gardens director, Ingeniero Emiliano Sanchez here, and my very esteemed colleague, Aileu Galde, from the educational section of the garden. They are here with me today. We're very happy and grateful to have been invited to your event, and we wish you the best in this event and on all your endeavors. And please visit our social media. We have a Facebook and an Instagram page, and we are also having a new website. The website of the garden is brand new. Go visit it and have a tour on the website so you can learn about our activities. I thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Professor Maruri. Let's give her another round of applause to her and her team from Cadereyta Botanical Garden, please. As part of the committee and the members of the school, we want to give you this small gift. Also, thanks to our patrocinators.
Thank you very much.
And we want to start now with the round of questions. Has anyone has a question? I remember you that we have the raffle. So any questions that you may have, you will win a raffle ticket that will be announced the winners at the end of the STEM week. So any questions, comments?
Okay.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the summer program that you mentioned?
A summer camp.
The
The summer camp is oriented to school children. It occurs during the summer vacation. I think the official period of vacations. It is oriented to school children between 6 and 12 years. It has become a tradition of the Botanic Garden and is really well structured. I would say that without specifically aiming to that is an example of a STEM model of informal education in science, because we invite another institutions to offer workshops and specific activities, many of them regarding biology, I mean biodiversity and conservation, but others related to other subjects in science. And well, it takes place during the summer. There's a participation of how many niños en el curso de verano? About 100 of mostly school children from Cadereyta de Montes, which is also, it gives me opportunity to say that the name of the garden is Cadereyta Regional Botanic Garden because there is interest in the study of a specific region, but also the interest to impact in a region, an impact in the population of the region. So the main part of these school children taking part are from Cadereyta. They come also from other places, but it's important to educate people that will be one day the stakeholders and they will take decisions regarding their territory.
And do you have like any opportunities for other like students like ourselves to volunteer or?
Yes, of course. Please give us your email or write to us so we can. In fact, we were planning last year to offer a partial social service scheme precisely helping in the summer camp with the students from Arkansas State University, but we finally couldn't concrete it. But yes, of course, please write to us. I will give you my email. Write to me.
Well, thank you for the presentation. It was really good. My question was also complemented towards the one already made, but you mentioned the importance of giving children the education in science from a young age and the different approaches. How will be your comments or thoughts on actually helping new generations, younger generations, on developing an appreciation for nature in these kind of spaces?
It's absolutely necessary. It is absolutely necessary. And well, school children, young school children, maybe are prone to have a natural relation with nature, and the botanical garden is a place to create that bond in an early age, because before they get too distracted with devices and social networks and so on. But bonding with nature is a natural process, and it's maybe more clear in young stages. So we try to take advantage of that, prone into that relationship with nature.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you for your presentation. And second, I went to the botanical garden like 2 years ago, almost like on these dates. And I wanted to ask, like, how does the botanical garden deal with like extreme periods of drought or periods when there's a lot of rain and some species may over water? And what are the measures that you have for those cases?
Well, I can answer in general terms. The horticulture and curatorial team of the garden is taking care of the living collections. I mean, an advantage of having a living collection of plants of the region where the garden is located gives the relative advantage that no big maintenance is required, because it's sort of a same environment. But anyway, it doesn't mean that no tasks will be put in place to ensure the maintenance of the collection. I mean, if the year is dry, very dry, waters of the plants of the living collections are water. I mean, those are maintenance watering, riegos de mantenimiento is in Spanish. And well, in the case of flooding, also measures are taken so the planters of the garden of the living collections do not sow in excess, so they do not drought. So there's a constant curatorial activity to ensure that the plants of the living collection are kept alive. The living collection, the garden has a living collection of plants and also has a natural area, and the natural area, well, there is not the same thing, and then the local ecosystem deals with drought and also with flooding, and no specific maintenance is done to ensure that plants will be good. But the living collection is a different thing, and you should keep it alive, because those plants, and many of them, and even more those in threat, the living collection of the garden has threatened species, are under custody of the garden, but in fact they belong to the nation, according to our legislation. But you should ensure and make an effort to ensure that they will kept alive. See? Sorry. Yes.
Mycorrhizal relationships between fungi and cacti. I'm familiar that some, like in forest areas, it's more common to find mycorrhizal relationships between plants and fungi. But I wanted to know if, like in cacti or in desert semi-arid areas, is it common or is it?
It exists as well. It exists as well. I am not a specialist on the subject, so I cannot offer excessive detail, but it is already being studied. The community of mycorrhiza of cacti. In fact, a student of the Autonomous University of Mexico has done part of his dissertation sampling cacti at the garden to study the mycorrhizal community in cacti. So yes, it does exist. And there's sort of evidence that they release water molecules in periods of drought to their neighbors, which is part of the beauty of the cacti, thinking about the cacti as the water tank, not only for their own survival, but also for the survival of the surrounding community. But I am not a specialist, I'm sorry.
Hello, thank
Hi.
you for coming, first of all. What do you think about planting of invasive species for decorations, like is seen here in Arkansas, even in our campus, we have that problem. And what can we do to help it?
Oh, don't make me start. Well, yes. What can I say? The Botanic Garden precisely promotes the knowledge and the understanding of biodiversity, of the local biodiversity, and one part of our speech as well, and one part of research works in the garden are to study precisely the invasive species. We have a severe problem, I mean, in all this region with several species, and education is required to make people aware that is not the, well, that the ornamental reason is not enough when you're putting in risk the local ecosystem. So inform your administrative authorities about these issues. Tell them that it's a risk because you're in the middle of a natural landscape, even when transformed is a natural landscape. And for those species, it's easy to go beyond your walls and expand in the natural environment. So, well, if they're not educated, educate them yourself. It's a very important point. And yes, at the Botanical Garden, we have speech and activities and materials in order to educate people regarding invasive species, exotic invasive species, exotic species that become invasive. Yeah, thank you.
I was curious about like the place of the Botanic Garden. Like, is it open to everyone? Where can you visit it? Visit hours, whatever. I mean, it looks like a pretty place.
It is, and welcome to the Cadereyta Regional Botanic Garden. It is a public garden that belongs to the state of Querétaro, and we are open all year round. I mean, from Monday to Sunday, all the year. We do not close. Our opening hours are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I recommend you to do an appointment because we work gates closed. That doesn't mean that the garden is closed, but the gate is closed. That is a legacy from the pandemics when we needed to organize the visitors so they didn't group massively. And it's a better way for the garden to offer a careful guided tour to every visitor. So guided tours are offered every hour. It's better to have a reservation. Please visit the Facebook page of the Botanical Garden or our new website to obtain the information. It is open to all public. If you're interested in a scholar visit, it's better to write an email so you have a reservation, a specific reservation for an institution, for example, for the Arkansas State University. You have already visited us as an institution, and it's free entrance. That means that you do not pay because it is a public institution. But yes, all tours are guided tours in order to educate.
You said like it's a place for research and exhibition and education, right? So like there at the Botanic Garden, you have a lot of species, no? When they are doing research, like you can watch them do the research when you're there, or they take samples to another part.
Oh, well, that's an issue of a different complexity. We have a group of students of one of our main academic partners, which is researchers of the National Autonomous University of Mexico, the Institute of Ecology. They have been working in the garden for a number of years, working mostly with the natural area of the garden, studying several aspects related to reproductive biology, pollination syndromes, the community of Opuntia and the conservation state, invasive species as well. And most of the projects are the dissertation project of a student, undergraduate or graduate student, and they ask to the botanical garden, they present to the botanical garden the requirements, the objectives and the requirements of the research. If it involves recollection of biological material, every single recollection activity at the garden should be approved according to the SEMARNAT procedures in force, which means that the sampling of a species that is in the National Standard 059, the domestic list of threatened species, should a person interested in collecting a sample of that sort of species should obtain a permission for collection. And from the rest of the species is, I don't know how to translate that in English. The name, I'm sorry, is aviso de colecta. That's the permission that you should tramit. I mean, the short answer is, if you have interest in develop research at the botanical garden, please come talk to us. It is done under a formal scheme, an agreement with the institution, with a tutor or a professor that is leading the research, and according to the legal procedures regarding the use and recollection of plants.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks a lot, everyone. I think we will finish with our round of questions. We invite you all to remain for the talk of 5 p.m. about scuba diving and assist with the roundtable of tips and tricks to survive in STEM. Thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll see you we will see you all along the week. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
If anyone hasn't visited the observatory, it is now open and it will have open times the whole week. So right now you can go and visit, and come back to the next stop.